We are here to talk about linear equations in two variables. It is lesson 17 time. And if you know how to play Battleship, you should get a pretty cool idea how to do this. Because in Battleship, they set up the grid with letters like A, B, C, and then numbers. And we're just going to use numbers and numbers. I wonder if you've heard of the saying, I think, therefore I am. It's a pretty famous philosophical statement made by a gentleman by the name of, that's his picture, Rene Descartes. And Rene Descartes was a really, really smart guy. He figured out a lot of things, one of which is one of the most important things that I personally have figured out in life. I wonder if that means I'm pretty smart. He said, conquer yourself rather than the world, because I have spent a lifetime trying to get better at conquering myself with a whole lot of help from above. Now, Rene Descartes also invented the rectangular coordinate system, which has been known as the Cartesian Plane, which is a way of giving him credit. Rene Descartes, Cartesian Plane. All right, so when we consider the Cartesian plane and what it is that we are going to do with the Cartesian plane and so on and so forth, the first thing we have to do is be able to plot points in it like Battleship. You'll notice that there are basically two, if you will, parts put together, an ordered pair of an X and a Y. And just like the alphabet goes X, Y, so too do points go X, Y. And this is very simple review of stuff we did in high school, but let's go through it real quick, because if we don't do this and then someone doesn't understand, they can't possibly get the whole lesson we're going to talk about. So point A asks for the point -2, 4. So that means the X, because it's always X, Y, the X is -2 and the Y is 4. So on Battleship, you might go like, say, C4, and you'd line up across the top, you'd go, okay, where's the letter C meet the row 4? So now I'm going to look for where the X of -2 and the Y of 4 meet. So here's where the X is -2, and then up here is where the Y is 4. So that's where the point -2, 4 is located, point A. Where do you think point B would be located? Well, that would be where X is 4 and B is -2. So there's where B is located. What about C? Now that's actually a little tricky. It's at -3, 0. And if it's at 0, that means it stays on the axis. In this case, the Y is going to be 0. And the Y is 0 on the X-axis. Next up, where is the point 0, -3? Now keep in mind, this is not when the Y is 0, it's when the X is 0. So here's where the X is 0, and here's where the Y is -3. So there's my point D. All right? So there's points A, B, C, and D put up for you. One other thing to keep in mind is with the rectangular coordinate system, we have what we call quadrants. The upper right is quadrant 1, and then you go counterclockwise for 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So now I happen to love the sport of hockey. So let's have you find the points H, O, C, K, E, and Y. And for each point, state what quadrant in which the point lies. So we're going to do a little stop and start here. You're going to find all of those points, and then I'm going to list them for you. Go ahead. Okay, point H is here. It's 3, 5, and clearly this is in quadrant 1. O is -2, 7. It's actually up off the graph a little bit here because the graph stops at 6. But there's where -2, 7 is, and that's in quadrant 2. -1, 4, point C, is also in quadrant 2. It's right up here. Here's where X is -1, Y is 4. And 5, -4. This time we're in the fourth quadrant, okay, because we're at X is 5, Y is -4. And E is the point 5, 0. And the tricky point on that one, here's the point where E is 5, 0. Just like the previous point was 5, -4, well, 5, 0 is here because it's 5, and then I don't have to go up or down because it's 5, 0. And that's not in a quadrant because it's right on the axis. And then -5, -2 is in the third quadrant. Here it is, where x is -5 and y is -2. Okay? All right, let's take a look at the next one here. Determine the coordinates of points E, F, and G. So here's point E down here, F, and G. Go ahead and answer those with a little stop and start, and I'll go over the correct answers for you. Okay, so point E is going to be the point -4 to -2. So you can see I'm at -4 and I'm down 2 to -2. By the way, what quadrant is that in? Remember, we start in the upper right, 1, counterclockwise, 2, 3, 4. So we're in the third quadrant. What about the point F? That would be the point -2, 0. Here's where x is -2. The y I don't go up and down. It's -2, 0. And you stay exactly where it is that you are. You don't move. I should say you're not in a quadrant. Okay, -2, 0. And G, likewise, is not in a quadrant because you're right on the axis, and that's at the point 6, 0. Okay? Now, one last thing I want to do with this video is I want to take a step back before we take a step forward. 2 steps forward. Functions. What is a function? Now, a function is basically something that follows a rule, and there's an input and an output, like this diagram here. One way to name the function is f of x equals 2x plus 1. Okay. Another way to name it would be y equals 2x plus 1. Functions can look like graphs. Functions can have, we draw out what we call a domain and a range, and we connect certain things together, input elements from the domain with output elements from the range, or we can put a function as a table. The big thing about a function is any element in the domain, any x value, it can only have, like in this diagram in the upper right, one y value coming from it. You can't have 2 different y values. So for instance, 1 goes to 1. If 1 also went to 4, that would not be a function. You can't do that. It would be a relation, but it would not be a function. So if you notice in this table, all the x values are different. They're unique. -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. That's a good function. If it went -2, -1, -1, 0, that would not be a function because you can't have it listed twice. So that's just a very cursory and quick review of functions. But the big thing I want you to walk away from is that there is this thing called the domain, and the domain is the set of all the inputs, okay? And there's a corresponding group or set called the range, and the range is the set of all the outputs. So the domain, set of all inputs, range, set of all outputs. And we use the letter X to indicate that something's in the domain, that it is an input. And we use the letter Y to represent that something is in the range, it's in the output. So if it says something like down here, f of x equals, remember f of x and y are the same thing, this is like saying the output is 2 times the input plus 1, because x means input, y or f of x means output. Output is 2 times the input plus 1. Okay, so that's just a quick review of some function terminology. And now we will proceed forward into talking about linear equations.